Models are probably the easiest section of a Coldbox application to test. They don't have any user interface logic, they often don't involve overly complicated sections of your app in any strange ways. Models are often pretty self-contained, and thus they're easier to unit test. CommandBox will also create the unit test for your models for you with just one command. I've got that command typed out here in our CommandBox prompt, Coldbox create model test. Then you give it the path to where the models live in your application. In our case, it's the default location, the models folder, and I'm going to make a test for the messages CFC. Then you specify the methods inside that CFC for which you'd like to create tests. I've got save, list, and search typed out here. I'm going to run that, and you can see CommandBox created tests for us in a file called messages_test.cfc. Let's take a look at that. Here's our test folder, specs, unit, there's messages_test.cfc. Inside it, we've got our before all and after all lifecycle methods that we talked about a little bit in a previous video. And I've also got tests for save, list, and search functions right here in this describe block. We're almost ready to go. There's one other thing you have to change. Notice here at the very top of the file, it says model equals, and then there's this pipe model path pipe thing. There's also a comment up here that says it's our responsibility to update that annotation and point it to the actual model. So I'm just going to go in here and change this to be models.messages. Save that. Now let's go back to our browser. Here's our test harness from before. I'm going to reload that. And now you can see we have tests in here for our messages CFC. There's calls in here for all three of the tests that we just created. They're of course all failing right now, which is by design. You want your tests to fail when you first create them. You can see back here in the code, expect false to be true is what the default expectation was added to all three of those tests. Again, that's by design. You want your test to fail. That way you don't have any false positives when you go here to run your tests. What you don't want to have happen is you create 10 basically empty tests, have them all pass, and then go on vacation for a week, come back, run your tests, forgetting that you didn't actually put any content in those tests to make them check your application. And then you see a bunch of green check boxes thinking everything is tested in your application, it's ready to go to production, when in reality, you haven't tested anything. So that's why the tests fail by default. But you can see it's pretty easy to add them to our application. You type one command from your CommandBox prompt, go into that file, make one minor edit at the top, save and reload your test harness, and you're done. You can run that same command that we have here on the screen for any other models in your application, saving you a lot of time writing the repetitive boilerplate code if you were to type those files out by hand just to get started. Instead of dealing with that manually, you just type the Coldbox create model test command we have on the screen, and you repeat that for whatever models you want to test in your application. In a perfect situation, you'll have tests for all of your model code, but realistically, maybe start with the simplest model in your app, get that working, and then advance on from there to other CFCs as you're more comfortable with this process. There's no rule that says you have to test everything in your app to start. A lot of larger projects, especially projects that have been around for a long time, it can be kind of a cumbersome, overwhelming process to think about all the things that have to get tested. What I would recommend is break it down into sections. Start with just your models. And if you have a lot of models, put them in alphabetical order, or put them in the order of which files are smallest and which database tables have the fewest columns in them. Write a test for that, and then move on from there as you need to. You can, of course, get more information about writing tests at coldbox.ortusbooks.com or testbox.ortusbooks.com.